Welcome back to the Thermo Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Jayton Miller, and today I want to take a little bit of a different approach. I actually have a document that I'm going to be reading off of. I wanted to make sure that I get all of this information here for you guys, so if it seems a little more robotic today, that's going to be why. But today we're going to be talking about the Thermo Diet and how to do the Thermo Diet if you want to be largely plant-based, specifically from a vegetarian aspect. So first off, it's important to identify what it means to have good health. In the perspective of the Thermo Diet view on health in the human body, it's from a systemic or holistic view. The body has one whole system that operates optimally only when two major conditions are fulfilled. All micronutrient deficiencies are corrected. Therefore, anything that causes micronutrient deficiencies would be anti-health. The body is also hormonally balanced, meaning these stress hormones like cortisol, estrogen, prolactin, SHBG, etc. are low, while protective hormones like all of the reproductive hormones and thyroid hormones are high in being used to the full extent and being used correctly throughout the entirety of the body. So the balance of the ratios of stress to protective hormones are absolutely essential for health in the body. Therefore, anything that causes hormonal imbalance and endocrine disruption is considered unhealthy. If anybody agrees that the body does not need adequate micronutrient levels to operate properly, or that the body should have higher stress hormones and low reproductive hormones, then it's understandable that they'd agree with the Thermo philosophy. Many people are now taking up largely plant-based diets, and for some, it is completely reasonable for ethical or religious/spiritual reasons. However, doing this to optimize the health of the human body is not ideal. The human body cannot thrive on a diet that is composed solely of plants. This is why the decision to undertake a vegetarian diet would be the most wise when looking to transition to a largely plant-based diet. In this episode, you are going to learn the 5 laws of food for Thermo that are needed in order to optimize a vegetarian diet by eliminating as many micronutrient deficiencies as possible and bringing the hormonal status of the body back into a state of balance. The definition of vegetarianism that is going to be used for this episode is not consuming any animal products that were produced through the slaughter of an animal. In this light, vegetarians can consume fruits and vegetables and associated derivatives from plants, eggs, dairy products, and things like honey from insects and things like that. So whenever it comes to a largely plant-based diet, there are key aspects that we need to consider when looking to optimize it, such as you are most likely going to have deficiencies in vitamin D, E, vitamin B12, zinc, copper, iron, magnesium, vitamin K, creatine. This isn't essential, but it aids in optimal muscle and brain function. Carnosine, also not essential, but still aids in optimal muscle function. Taurine, iodine, vitamin A in the form of retinoids, the more favorable version of vitamin A, and then calcium. This isn't really a problem in the version of vegetarianism, but vegans typically have trouble getting enough calcium, especially because vegetables tend to not have them freely available to the human body to be able to take them up. So they're not bioavailable in that sense. So, and then you're going to face the problem of excessive amounts of raw cruciferous vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, and grains. So whenever you do this, you have an excess of goitrogen exposure. So this is an anti-thyroid compound that inhibits the uptake of vital nutrients needed for thyroid function, such as iodine. For instance, like T4, the molecule is actually made up of a tyrosine molecule and then 4 iodine molecules attached to it. And then T3 is a tyrosine molecule with 3 iodine molecules attached to it. And T4 is acted upon by the deiodinase enzyme that cleaves off one of the iodine molecules and turns it into the more active thyroid hormone T3. You also tend to increase the bacterial and fungal growth in the intestinal tract due to the excessive amount of fiber. This has also been shown to increase SHBG, lowering the amount of usable protective hormones in the body. So SHBG is sex hormone binding globulin, and that tends to attach itself to things like testosterone, rendering it unable to attach to the receptor. Then you have excessive carotenoids, the less favorable form of vitamin A. So excessive vitamin A blocks optimal functioning on the thyroid, especially whenever it's in the carotenoid form. High amounts of age-promoting fats, PUFAs, so potentially the closest thing to poison that we can consume. This type of fat is highly unstable in the presence of light or heat, creating inflammation and acting as a precursor to estrogenic activity in the body, especially whenever it comes to prostaglandin synthesis. It also has a direct inhibition of thyroid performance, so that's not favorable. You're also going to have a high intake of phytic acid, which is another chelator it's a compound that attaches to various minerals and steals them from the body, rendering them inactive and passing them from the system so we can't take them up. Then you also have a high intake of trypsin inhibitors. So this leads to poor digestion performance, especially digestion of protein. You have a high gluten intake typically, so this is a storage molecule that creates an autoimmune response in people with compromised digestive systems. It has also been shown to significantly increase prolactin levels, which is not a hormone that we want to have in excess in the body. Then you have an increased intake of phytoestrogens, especially things like soy, which has isoflavones like diadzine and genistein. And then you also have things like flax, which is high in lignans, and other different kinds of compounds that are anti-protective hormones. Then you tend to develop a protein deficiency. So whenever you don't consume enough protein, especially in a bioavailable form, even less of it is going to be digested because of the trypsin inhibitors and things like that. But protein deficiency also leads to deficiency in enzyme production. It leads to muscle wasting, excessive hunger, aching, thinning hair, brittle nails, weakened bones, fatigue, mood swings, sleep problems, and slow wound healing, among other things. So what are some steps that a vegetarian can take in order to alleviate these deficiencies and avoid the problems commonly seen with a largely plant-based diet and promote an optimal state of health? Well, the first thing that you need to make sure that you do is get enough protein. So at minimum, if you're a woman, you should be getting around 80 grams of protein a day. And if you're a man, at minimum, you should be getting around 120 grams of protein per day, no matter what your size is. So the first thing that you can do is eat potatoes. So specifically, white potatoes are the best possible plant-derived protein there is, with 110% as qualitative protein. So this means that they are more perfect than the most pristine So the egg yolk in scientific studies is what's used to measure protein quality up against. And this is actually better than the egg yolk protein because it has what's known as keto acids in it, which can be kind of shifted into amino acids, and then that can be used to build protein. So they tend to have a little bit more bioavailable protein content in them. Next, you have eggs. So eggs should be consumed not only for the protein content, but also for the choline, B vitamins, vitamin A in the more favorable form. which is retinoids. Then you have vitamin E and other nutrients that are found in the yolk. So make sure to cook the egg whites, as the protein is more easily assimilated, and you tend to degrade some of the anti-nutrients that are found inside of the actual egg white. And the nutrients in the yolk are best assimilated and do not become degraded when the yolk is still runny. So what I like to do is I separate the yolk from the white, I cook the whites, and then eat the yolks raw. Next, we have cheese and milk. So these are not only going to be a major source of protein on this type of diet, but are great sources of calcium, which is needed to help balance the calcium to phosphate ratio in the body to allow for various metabolic processes to take place properly. Some of the best types of cheese are Parmigiano Reggiano, I hope I said that correctly, ricotta, pecorino. I'm not sure if I'm saying these correctly, so forgive me. My pronunciation might be a little off. And cottage cheese. And then goat milk is more easily digested for people who tend to have problems digesting cow's milk. Make sure to look out for any kinds of gums, additives, or flavorings that might be added to these. Usually when looking at the ingredients section, you should only have 2 to 4 ingredients. And then finally, we have mushrooms. So mushrooms are a decent source of protein on a largely plant-based diet. However, you want to make sure that you cook them very thoroughly, as they do have defensive compounds in them that can be toxic to the system when they are not cooked out. So boiling them for about 30 minutes or so should be sufficient to break down the defensive molecules. You can also slice them extremely thin and saute them on a medium-high heat for several minutes until they are very soft in something like butter, which makes them taste quite delicious. And then the second thing you need to do is focus on fruits and roots over vegetables. So whenever we talk about vegetables, we are talking about leaves and stems. And then fruits are anything that grow from a flower and typically have seeds. So things like cucumbers, peppers, squash, and things like that, those are all actually fruit. They're not actually vegetables. So things like kale, broccoli, celery in some cases, all of these are going to be the things that have defensive compounds in them and defensive mechanisms that are going to be anti-health. So ideally, when doing this type of diet, you would avoid vegetables in their entirety. Unfortunately, many people have misconceptions about the botanical definition, which I just went through. So you also want to make sure that they are well ripened. So eating unripe fruit takes a toll on the digestive system and over time can lead to issues. So make sure the fruits and roots are well ripened. And then the third thing that you can do is focus on saturated fats. So saturated fats are favorable because of their stability at high temperatures. Their single bonded molecular structure makes them extremely flexible and stable when exposed to light or heat. Coconut oil is potentially the most metabolically friendly saturated fat. And then you have cacao, butter, ghee, cheeses, and milk. And then you have the monounsaturated fats that can be consumed in moderation, but I don't think that they should take priority over the saturated variety, which are things like olive oil, avocado oil, and argan oil, among some other ones. And then we have salt. So sodium is one of the most abundant electrolytes in the human body. Salt is the best way to get this into the body and can even help with stomach acid formation due to the chloride content. So salt is able to help pull the body out of a stress state when downregulating stress hormones like aldosterone and cortisol. When these hormones are lowered, we are then able to better hold on to other minerals more effectively, such as magnesium. Salt is necessary for proper nervous system signaling and muscle contraction. Without enough of it, we would have misfirings and the entire system would go into disarray. So some good forms of salt would be Celtic sea salt, Redmond real salt, Aztec sea salt, and then Morton's pickling salt, which is actually a rather cheap one, but it's a very high quality and very good one. Then we have supplementation. So this is the fifth and final law. So even when not being on a plant-based diet, there are certain supplements that are not easily gotten, even on the most ideal diet. Due to soil degradation and poor nutrient density of the food that we consume today in our society, there are certain nutrients we simply cannot get enough of from food alone on any form of eating. So this is why strategic supplementation is a necessity whenever you're looking to enter into a state of thriving. So the most common deficiencies that are seen, especially in the West, are magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin E, and choline. So choline can be gotten in eggs and liver, but getting a bit extra from supplementation can ensure the health of the liver is optimal, as choline is used to export cholesterol from the liver and helps to keep it lean and healthy. When it comes to a largely plant-based diet, there are several trace minerals that become deficient as well and remain hard to get without consuming animal products such as zinc, copper, selenium, and iodine. Supplementing with these nutrients is going to be crucial in order to optimize your health and make sure your body is firing on all cylinders when on a largely plant-based diet. So using these 5 laws of food found throughout this episode is going to allow for the best possible results whenever looking to optimize your health and remaining true to the vegetarian diet. So for anybody listening out there who is largely plant-based and you want to stay thermo, I think this is the best way to do it. If you also open yourself up to fish, then that allows you to get many of the different trace minerals that I talked about that you wouldn't have to supplement with. So for instance, if you ate oysters and shrimp, you would avoid basically all of the trace minerals that I mentioned. And then you eat a little bit of seaweed, cover the iodine, and you should be good. So I hope this helps. Send this to anybody who is largely plant-based and they're kind of struggling a little bit. I think that this would help them tremendously. So stay thermo and have a good one. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you want us to cover a different topic.